Now let's look at the data type. Depending on the type of data you have is going to determine what you can do with it. So we have two different types of variables. We have categorical and numerical. So we're going to look specifically here at univariate data sets. If we have a set of a categorical variable, sometimes you'll hear that qualitative. That means that the individual observations are categorical responses. It is something that is placing that individual in a particular category. Examples here would be things like hair color, eye color, type of car driven, those kinds of descriptors that put you into a particular category. If your univariate data set is numerical, sometimes you see that as quantitative. Here, each observation is actually a number. It's important to note that numerical data is not automatically numerical if you have a number. For example, your student ID number. Yes, it's a number, but it's not numerical. For a variable to be numerical, it needs to make sense to do things like adding the values or finding the average. And for things like your student number, it's really just an identifier. Now we can take numerical variables one step further, and we can describe them as either discrete or continuous. So our discrete variables would be points. So a discrete variable would be values that correspond to isolated points on a number line. You can think of discrete data as things that can be counted. A continuous numerical variable is when possible values can form an entire interval. So you can think of these as things that you measure. So an example of a discrete numerical variable would be the number of traffic lights that you stopped at on the way to school. But a continuous variable would be something like the miles that you drove to school if you were rounding to the nearest 10th or 100th, or perhaps the time it took you to get to school. So the best way for me to differentiate between these is to describe things that can be counted as discrete and things that I would measure as continuous. So for example, we're looking at the number of text messages sent on a particular day. So you would count this. You could send 0, 1, 2, 3. These are isolated points. On the other hand, if we were to look at the time spent texting, then that would be continuous data because you can take any amount of time to spend on texting. Often we will round these for convenience, but because we could measure this as specifically as we had the tools to do, that would make this continuous.